The bold move by President Trump of signing an executive order in the first few days of his presidency, freezing all US foreign aid for 90 days, this sweeping measure, ostensibly to ensure alignment with his America First agenda, has sparked global concerns about the ramifications for humanitarian programs and global alliances. But in the middle of all this, military aid to Ukraine, there's assurances that this has been spared, though this claim remains shrouded in ambiguity, and various news reports have said one thing, various news reports have said another, leaving Ukraine supporters uneasy. Trump's decree holds US foreign assistance to review its alignment with national interests, and programs considered inefficient or irrelevant to US foreign policy may face termination. This freeze has thrown the international aid community into disarray, with fears of funding cuts impacting critical areas such as disease prevention, education, counter-trafficking initiatives, and so on. Interaction, a coalition of aid organizations, warns that this halt could create power vacuums swiftly exploited by global adversaries like Russia or China. And the humanitarian impact is particularly dire. Aid channels delivering clean water, HIV medication, emergency food have ground to a halt in the last few days. Meanwhile, State Department memos have introduced rigid barriers for exemptions, effectively paralyzing many life-saving programs. Alexander Kovanenko, the director of Ukraine's Center for Countering Disinformation, has claimed that the freeze excludes military aid to Ukraine. Yet Washington has not confirmed this, leaving a critical lifeline under scrutiny and struggling for survival. Since 2014, the US has allocated $69.2 billion to Ukraine, primarily to counter Russian aggression, and recent aid packages under President Biden included significant allocations for weaponry and infrastructure restoration. But whether these commitments are ironclad under the new administration now remains to be seen, and the ambiguity has emboldened European leaders to call for increased EU parity in supporting Ukraine. The EU Foreign Affairs Chief, Kai Kallas, emphasizes Europe's readiness to step up if the US assistance wanes. Yet, as Lithuania's defense minister points out, the EU remains heavily dependent on US military technology and resources. And European nations are accelerating defense spending, with Lithuania committed to a staggering 6% of GDP by 2030. This shift reflects both pressure from the US and the immediate threat of Russian aggression. But Europe's capacity to bridge the gap left by potential US drawdown is limited. The EU's fragmented defense industry and reliance on American arms underscore the difficulty of achieving true parity. Britain, for its part, has reaffirmed its £3 billion annual commitment to Ukraine, extending until 2030, and Prime Minister Keir Starmer's proposed defence agreements include establishing military bases in Ukraine, signalling a long-term investment in regional stability. The US foreign aid freeze raises fundamental questions about transatlantic security. Europe cannot afford to lose America's robust support, but it must also develop independent defense capabilities. And simultaneously, Trump's rhetoric about cutting aid to countries that hate us has alienated allies and sowed uncertainty about the reliability of US commitments. For Ukraine, this review period is a critical juncture. As Russia's war machine grinds on, Ukraine's survival depends on consistent Western support. While the EU has shown resolve, its capacity to match US assistance, financially or militarily, remains constrained. Trump's foreign aid freeze symbolises a pivot in US global leadership, one that prioritises domestic interests while forcing allies to shoulder more responsibility. For Ukraine, this policy shift introduces uncertainty at a pivotal moment in its resistance against Russia. While Europe scrambles to fill the gaps, the question remains, can the West afford a weakened US role in global stability? In the coming weeks, clarity about Ukraine's exclusion or inclusion in Trump's review will be vital. In the meantime, Europe must continue to strengthen its defences, not just for Ukraine, but for the broader principles of sovereignty and security that underpin the international order.